All right. Hello, everybody, and happy 2023. So, there's a ton of stuff to cover today. And rather than have some lengthy preamble, I'm going to try to jump right into it. I do have to say a couple of pre show notes, though. So, today we're going to do an AWS recap. And it's important to note that many of these services are in preview. They are this slide deck is the work of a bunch of people at Kalen, a bunch of people at Amazon. This is not just me that's building this crazy long deck. And the announcements, I haven't personally had the opportunity to try literally every single service. So what we're going to do is I'm going to provide my opinions and what I think on the services that I have had the opportunity to try out. And otherwise, I'm just going to cover the basic stuff that we see from the launch announcements. So, with that said, we are off to the races. So, my name is Randall Hunt. I'm a software person. I've been doing software for a really long time, and I love it. I love AWS and I love the cloud. And so, this is my reinvent for me is basically developer Christmas, and I just love kind of playing with all of the new services. It's you get all these new toys to build and run fun things. Now, there's a lot to cover today. First, we're going to go over some global updates, just some infrastructure stuff. Then we're going to go into the core infrastructure, the compute, the networking, the storage. We'll give some DevOps updates. We'll do some stuff focused on builders and developers. We'll dive deep into security, data and analytics, quick stint over in serverless. We're going to cover AI and ML pretty in depth. There might be a few repeated things. Like I said, this is my first time doing this deck, and I'd appreciate any feedback as we go along. If you're watching on YouTube or on LinkedIn or on Twitter, you can add questions. I will do my best to respond to them, but given the quick length here, it's going to be difficult. All right, let's jump in. So global infrastructure updates. There are now 31 launched regions with more on the way. There are 99 availability zones, 29 local zones. Local zones, if those of you who don't know, are they let you deploy kind of specific instances, specific EBS types, and they each local zone has different capabilities. For instance, the LAX local zone you can run EKS in, but you can't do that in every other local zones. Wavelength zones, which are connected to 5G networks, there are 29 of those. I believe they're more on the way. These are still only connected to Verizon for now within NAMR, and I think they're connected to multiple other cellular carriers across the world. There are 115 direct connect locations, 400 plus edge locations, and 13 regional edge casters, which serve a combined 90 cities and 47 countries, thousands of tier 1, 2, and 3 telecom peers globally. All of this backed by fully redundant 100 gigabit Ethernet parallel fiber, or 100 GB parallel fiber network that circles the globe. And again, with links to thousands of peers. One of the interesting things that came out of reInvent this year was the announcement that AWS intended to be water positive by 2030. I love to see these sorts of things. And, Peter DeSantis talked about this. Adam Talipsky talked about this. Virtually every executive that spoke at AWS had something to say about this. And so 100% renewable energy by 2025 and water positive by 2030. Now, the interesting thing that's happening here is that if you think about data centers, there's a ton of cooling that has to happen, and that typically involves water. And by kind of minimizing the amount of water that they have to use from a data center perspective, there's a lot of unique stuff that they're able to do. I am not an expert on this sort of thing, so I'm just going to point you to you can find out more, which is HTTPS sustainability.aboutamazon.com. I know that link says HTTP, but we don't like HTTP links. We prefer HTTPS links. Additionally, the sustainability data is now available as part of AWS's Open Data Sponsorship Program. This has petabytes of data, including weather observations, ocean temperatures, climate projection data, satellite imagery, and this is a whole bunch of useful data that you can use to do forecasting. There's especially this NOAA one. I worked with the NCDC, National Climatic Data Center, in data set a long time ago to try and do some weather predictions. And there's terabytes and terabytes of data there. And it's got stuff, buoys that sit in the ocean and track all sorts of things. So that's sustainability, global infrastructure kind of update as a whole. Now let's dive into compute. If I had to describe compute this year, I would describe it primarily as the year of Nitro. So this is a picture of one of the AWS server blades that I was able to grab. while I was at reInvent, and these look pretty nifty. These actually power, I believe, their CDN nodes, but there's a Nitro card in there. And we got AWS Nitro v5. So for those of you who aren't aware, Nitro is the combination of the hypervisor, the software, the hardware, and top of rack switch and on server chips that allow you to use all of the power of the underlying instance. This is pretty powerful. It really allows for a cloud experience that wasn't available in the yesteryear days of a Zen or a more common hypervisor. You get the full underlying compute by offloading a lot of that cloud security work onto this Nitro hypervisor. This Nitro v5 system, it comes with double the transistors, 50% faster DRAM, more PCIe bandwidth, higher packet per second throughput, lower latency, and better performance per watt, again, on the sustainability kick there. Now, we're going to jump into some instance definitions. And before we do that, I just want to give everyone a quick reminder of how these instance types are named. So the first letter is the instance family. So, C would be compute, and then M would be, general purpose, and R would be RAM, I guess. You can guess typically the purpose of the instance type based on this instant family. Then you have the generation. The subsequent generations typically have better price performance. And then you have the suffix, which is an indicator of the capabilities. These can be mixed and matched, with the exception, I would say, of A, G, and I. So A is for AMD, G is for Graviton, and I is for Intel. It used to be Intel was your only option, and so many of the older instance families don't have that Intel I suffix. Then you have additional suffixes, things like D for instant store volumes, N for network optimization, B for block storage optimization, E for extra storage or memory, and Z for high frequency. Let's launch into all of the new updates that we have. So Peter DeSantis was able to go and talk about Graviton. Graviton is AWS's homegrown silicon. It's part of their purchase of and then incorporation of Annapurna Labs that makes the silicon that makes the Nitro hypervisor possible, makes the silicon that makes the Graviton processor possible. And this is, a processor that is built for the cloud. This Graviton instance, this Graviton 3E processor, is designed primarily for HPC, high performance computing. The C7GN instances, meaning Graviton and then network optimized, they offer about 200 gigabits per second of networking bandwidth and 50% higher packet processing performance than existing Graviton-based EC2 instances. The instances are ideal for running some of the most demanding network-intensive workloads, virtual appliances, data analytics, CPU-based artificial intelligence, and machine learning inferences. And you can do a lot with ARM that you couldn't do just a few years ago. These go up to 64 vCPUs and up to 128 gigs of memory, and they're available for preview. And I think these are coming out pretty soon. I'm not certain on that one, but I thought I remembered seeing something in AWS News that they're out. And as you can see, these instances perform pretty well. I've been looking at the wrong slide. I apologize. The C7GN instance is the non-HPC version, and then the HPC version is the HPC 7G, which is the first high-performance computing-based Graviton instance. And these have about 35% higher performance on HPL, which is a computational benchmark for linear algebra, 12% better on GROMACS, which is molecular modeling library, and 30% better for options models, financial options models. And then we have the HPC 6ID instances. So these are optimized for high performance computing workloads. They are Intel based. They come with, they're expensive. I mean, they're like $5.70 an hour for on demand. They've got 200 gigabit per second networking, and then you have the EFA adapter. The hyperthreading is disabled to increase the per vCPU CPU throughput up to 5 gigabit gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth per vCPU. And they're available right now in US East and a couple of other regions. All right, now we have the Inf2. So this is, again, some custom silicon that AWS has. And these are designed to deliver high performance, low cost deep learning inference for applications. They're powered by up to 12 AWS Inferentia 2 chips. The third kind of iteration of that inference accelerator. Previously there were the Inf1 instances. So there's about 3x higher compute on these, 4x higher throughput, and up to 10x lower latency compared to the Inf1 generation. These are built to support ultra large, hundreds of billions of parameter models. They are built to scale out. Inf2 instances offer by default about 2.3 petaflops of deep learning performance and up to 384 gigabytes of accelerated memory with 9.8 terabytes of bandwidth. There's some stuff in here about Neuron-Link and the optimization for both TensorFlow and for PyTorch. One of the things that I'll say is the AWS Neuron SDK, which is built by the SageMaker team, it does a decent job of providing these options for PyTorch and TensorFlow and these optimizations. But the promise of being able to easily take an existing model and optimize it for this particular hardware, which is what the AWS Neuron SDK marketing says, is not quite true. I mean, it gets you part of the way there, but you still have to do a little bit of tinkering yourself if you really want to eke out the best performance from these things. And that can be things like quantization of your models using FP4 instead of FP8 or FP16 and stuff like that. Then you can see there's better communication framework that's built on top of these, and we'll get into a little bit more of that later when we talk about networking and how all of that is implemented. But for now, we have to keep going because we just have very little time and a ton of stuff to get through. And I'm just going to check on chat and see if anybody has said anything yet or if anyone has any questions. And the answer is no questions yet. If you do have any questions, please feel free to ask. It might take me a little bit to get to them, but I'll keep checking back periodically. All right, so next we have the EC2 R7IZ instance. This is a memory optimized instance up to, I forget how much RAM it scales to, but these are Intel based. They're high clock speed. That's what the Z suffix is for. 3.9 gigahertz and up to 128 vCPUs and 1 terabyte of memory. And then you've got your 50 gigabit per second network bandwidth and your 40 gigabit per second EBS bandwidth. And this is currently the highest performance of any x86 based instances and up to 20% faster than the Z1D instances. Most of the time, these instances are used to run things like SAP HANA and other things that use that, really take advantage of the high clock speed. If you're doing that, there are better options in 2023. Ain't nobody got to use SAP anymore. All right. Now we've got the M6IN, M6IND, R6IN, and R6IND instances. These are third gen Xeon processors running at up to 3.5 gigahertz, up to 200 gigabits per second of networking bandwidth. I think that's an important announcement from AWS is like you now have up to 200 gigabits per second of network bandwidth on a bunch of different instance types, up to 80 gigabits per second of EBS bandwidth, and up to 128 vCPUs or 512 gigs of memory. Then on the same instances, you can, the IDN and the IDNs, you can go up to 1 terabyte of memory and you can go up to 7.6 terabytes of NVMe attached SSD storage. These might be particularly good for running things like MongoDB. If you were going to roll your own MongoDB and not use a managed version, the 7.6 terabytes of NVMe SSD can be really, really good for expanding out of that terabyte of memory that you have. And it could also be good for running your own Elasticsearch clusters. There's also an EC2 Microsoft Office AMI, and that is kind of interesting. I am just checking chat here because I don't have a great view of it. Sorry. I don't care about Microsoft Office at all. My only Microsoft Office product that I love is PowerPoint, and I can't see myself using an EC2 instance to run that. I would probably just use an EC2 workspace or an AWS workspace instead. But this is available for those who need it. The Compute Optimizer now supports external metrics, so this can be helpful if you have a set of uh, eh, not necessarily business level metrics, but metrics that don't metrics about your application that don't correspond neatly to RAM or to networking throughput or to CPU usage or disk usage. You can publish these additional metrics, and then you can make compute optimization decisions about them. Uh, there integrations from Datadog, Dynatrace, Instana, New Relic, and you can also publish your own custom metrics into CloudWatch. Nitro enclaves now support EKS and Kubernetes. EC2 torn write prevention. This is pretty darn cool. So torn write prevention allows you to say with certainty that I am going to write up to this 16 KB block, and I can turn off certain double write configurations in different databases. You can't really turn off your like write ahead log or things like that, but you can turn off a lot of the disk optimizations that you might have done to speed up some of your databases. And in RDS, this is already available in the form of optimized write. So I think this is something that people should look into, and they should examine what their mount settings are for their various disks, what their look ahead settings are, and what their write ahead settings are, all of that sort of thing. Make sure that you're kind of falling within the new performance standard that's available with this. And this number that they say of up to 30% performance improvement without sacrificing endurance, we've actually seen higher than 30% performance improvement with some of the mount options that we've tested on MySQL. So I think that's almost a conservative estimate. Alrighty, but it could also be due to the new improved instances and things like that. Jumping into networking, VPC gets an integration with some of the existing sort of service discovery and observability capabilities of other services in the form of VPC Lattice. We got to chat with the team that's building this, and essentially, modern applications, they're built using all of these different modular and distributed components, and each component is a service that implements its own subset of functions. And to make all of these connect with each other, you need a sort of service mesh to discover where they are, authorize access, and then route the traffic. So VPC Lattice is this application layer networking service that gives you a consistent way to connect, secure, and monitor service communication without any prior networking expertise. And this is in preview. We do have an account that we got allow listed for this, and we've played around with it. I'm bullish on this. I think this could really go the distance, and I have no idea what the pricing is going to work out to be. There's some stuff we'll talk about later with some of the pricing that I kind of staunchly disagree with, but overall, I would say this is a great launch from AWS. And in the past, you had to do things to minimize your inter-AZ traffic costs. So I think it was Spotify or maybe it was Netflix. They wrote their own availability zone aware router that would prioritize talking to other instances or other nodes that were within the same AZ, as opposed to doing that cross AZ traffic. And the idea within VPC Lattice is that you might be able to do that. In addition, you could also set other routing rules and other sort of seamless authentication rules. Alrighty. Now we have AWS Verified Access. So this allows VPN-less access into corporate applications. I think the pricing that they've proposed for this is interesting. First of all, this is great. I love that we are getting out of the age of VPNs and moving more into this zero trust principle. That is pretty much where the industry needs to move. What I disagree with from AWS here is they've priced this in terms of application hours as opposed to connectivity hours, which makes comparing it to similar capabilities very difficult. And I also think the pricing is quite high for what they're providing. I would almost argue that a traffic cost or a per authorization cost is a better cost, or a per user cost is better than the per application hour cost. These can get quite expensive very quickly. And then the other thing is, it should be, instead of having, one endpoint for everything, which is what AWS Verified Access cost-wise incentivizes people to build, you should be able to spin up, as many as you want. But I'm open to being convinced otherwise, and I'm sure some folks from AWS will have something to say about that. And I can't wait to try this out more. We actually have a need for this at Kaylant for some of our internal tools that we don't really want to put behind a VPN, but we'd love to be able to authenticate access into. All right. So load balancing got a number of enhancements. So ALB now supports cross-zone load balancing, similar to the functionality that turning cross-zone load balancing off, that similar to the current functionality in ALB. This is a nice sort of break glass thing. If you see one AZ or one subnet is flagging, but it's not a hard down, you can go in and make a game time decision. Oh, let me just turn this off. NLB has additional health checks and configurability for those health checks. You can specify HTTP response codes now. You can configure consecutive health check responses, and you can set minimum healthy targets. And then you also have Route 53 application recovery controller, zonal shift for ALB and NLB. And I believe that's in preview. We'll talk about application recovery controller when we get to the DevOps section later. VPC Reachability Analyzer, which is a very useful tool, by the way, supports cross-account traces now. The Network Reachability Analyzer, VPC Reachability Analyzer are fantastic tools, especially if you're doing migrations or setting up net new networks. I can't tell you how good these tools have become in the last few years. AWS Network Manager now has real-time performance monitoring for the AWS Global Network. So this is, I have a demo of this, but I'm just not going to have time to show you today. But you can go and check it out yourself. All you need to do, go into the Network Manager console, and you can see your latency between different AWS regions from the perspective of your account. Okay, ENA Express. We have an article coming out about this either tomorrow or maybe the next day, and it's written by Scott on our team. The issue at large with TCP is that unless you're leveraging, multipath routing within TCP, which it is possible, typically you're using equal path. Like there's a routing protocol within IP or within the Ethernet where you're saying like, oh, I'm going to do equal path multi-cost. I forget the acronym, but it's a algorithm that allows you to basically find the route between two nodes with the best possible latency, but it doesn't update over time. And it also doesn't really deal with the issue of links becoming congested or, individual routers becoming slow and things like that. So AWS created this protocol called SRD, or Scalable Reliable Datagrams. And it's been around for a while. It can give you much better recovery from slow routers. It can, deal a lot with some of the packet reordering. And SRD doesn't deal with the packet reordering, but if you're using something like MPI or libfabric, that will deal with the packet reordering for you. Or you can write your own sort of application level driver that will be able to deal with the out of the order packets. Now, the advantage of ENA Express is that it can now cast these TCP and UDP communications that happen on your network into SRD, so that your tail latency, your P99 kind of latency, is improved significantly. And you can, transparent to your application, because the ENA Express adapter takes care of this, you can now leverage SRD. I really think this is one of the unsung heroes of reInvent, because it's going to launch this SRD protocol into the fore and allow people to start to take advantage of it. There's a deep dive on this that Scott is publishing tomorrow, so I'll post that later. Okay, getting into storage. EFS got a number of different updates. Some of these were pre-invent updates, but there's new lifecycle policies. Reads are up to 60% lower, and writes are up to 40% lower latency, and it was optimized for small files as well. And with elastic throughput, you can basically provision as much throughput as you need on a pay-as-you-go basis. Keep in mind, in order to get some of the crazy numbers that you want out of elastic throughput, you are going to have to blindly swipe your credit card. It's pricey. That said, EFS with decent numbers is very reasonable. I think that AWS has done a good job on kind of building out the pricing structure for this, because you can start out with a fairly reasonable deployment, and then if you really need that performance from EFS, which makes you think, am I using EFS the wrong way? You can just swipe your credit card and keep sending up that bill to get the throughput that you want. I would actually advise, if that's what you're doing, maybe re-architect your application and consider other things. Going back to SRD, EBS IO2 is going to get support for SRD. So this means your writes from EC2 instances to EBS will leverage the SRD protocol instead of leveraging whatever sort of underlying protocol that AWS was using before. Again, higher throughput, better tail latency. It's going to be a free sort of performance improvement on your disk storage without you having to do anything. And that's one of the things that I've always enjoyed about doing cloud deployments and cloud development is I don't do anything, and Amazon just does all the work, and my stuff gets better and more performant over time. OpenZFS, basically doubled the throughput. You can leverage an NVMe cache now, and up to 10 gigabits per second of throughput, 10 gigabytes per second of throughput, and up to 350,000 IOPS. This NVMe cache can go up to, I think, 2.5 terabytes with read performance over a million IOPS with latency in the hundreds of microseconds, which is crazy. FSX team has been doing a lot of great work, and love to see all of the great performance that's coming out of there. FSX for NetApp ONTAP. I've never actually used NetApp ONTAP. I deployed it when this first came out last year and played around with it. It's kind of interesting to see how many people have strong opinions on like how this is the greatest file system of all time, and they're still wrong, but whatever. This has multi-AZ file systems, which it had before, but it becomes a little bit easier to access, and you don't have to add additional routes. And then the throughput got better. I think throughput getting better is a common refrain that we've seen. Okay, and now we're going to hop into DevOps. So ECS Service Connect. So this is the evolution of what started out as Route 53 service discovery. I wrote a blog post about that when it first came out back in 2017. And I think there's still a live demo that you can go to that has, the SRV records discovery and all this other stuff. This is the combo of AWS Cloud Map and Route 53 service discovery and all of those things into ECS. And if you think about what, stuff like etcd does for Kubernetes, where it's trying to place workloads, and it's also trying to provide a lookup mechanism for where those workloads are living and how you can route to them. This does much the same. There are lots of different implementations of service discovery. How does this work with VPC Lattice, I think, is an interesting conversation. There are lots of different ways that you can mix and match the capabilities of these. So I think picking the thing that corresponds best to your application development strategy is the right thing to do here. And now I'm going to take a quick break and check to see if there are any questions. And Gonzalo Vasquez says, that's fast. Thank you. Yes, we have to keep going very quickly. But if anybody has questions, please feel free to jump in and I'll do my best to answer. Okie dokie. So RDS got blue-green deployments for MySQL, MariaDB, and Aurora. You could sort of do this before manually. You would kind of spin things up from different snapshots, and then you could hook one replica in, and you could do some cutover. And this capability being built into RDS is useful. That said, there are certainly things to talk about with regard to Blue Green of database. Anyway, Elastic Disaster Recovery now has automated failback. So if you go into one region during a disaster and then everything's going well, you can now start to fail back to your primary region, and you're off to the races. Backup got support for S3. This was a pre-invent launch, support for VMware workloads. AWS backup for Amazon S3. I've got to be honest, I don't fully understand the utility of that one or the price of that one. It seems quite expensive for something that S3 already somewhat natively supports. But I'm open to being convinced or told otherwise if anyone has had a chance to dive deep on AWS backup for Amazon S3. You can now protect and restore your CloudFormation stacks, support for Redshift within backup, and you can delegate an organization-wide backup administration. This is what I was talking about earlier in terms of networking updates. So this is the real-time kind of view of AWS's global network and what things are being impacted and what your latency between these things are. I had a ball just playing with this. So if you just go into CloudWatch, you can open this up and you can build your own little metrics. I think it's fun. If you play any video games, if you play Valorant for Riot, for example, you can kind of map both inter-AZ traffic, and you can also map traffic from US West to US East, and even edge locations, or even like your ISP. Okie dokie. CloudWatch logs data protection. This is really darn cool. This gives you the ability to redact data in CloudWatch logs. So if you are logging PII or some other form of data, you can basically leverage a regular expression to go and say, hey, actually don't show this. And I believe that you can set this on an IAM condition. So some people can view the unredacted logs and some people cannot. S3 multi-region access point failover. So previously, the way that a lot of people did this is they would move this into their app code, and you would basically try multiple endpoints. This gives you kind of a global endpoint that spans S3 buckets in multiple regions, and you can build these multi-region applications with a much simpler architecture than what you used to use. Moving right along. Okay, Route 53 application recovery controller zonal shift. So zonal shift, it allows you to move traffic from an AZ that, in your opinion, could be causing an outage of some type, or not necessarily an outage, but like it could be browning out instead of going fully dark. In that case, you can implement the zonal shift on your behalf. Now, application recovery controller, what it does is it spins up the Route 53 control plane in multiple places, and it's a unique endpoint for you. So right now, Route 53 has the 100% SLA for view of records, but if you want to make changes to those records, Route 53 still has a dependency on US East 1. Now, by using application recovery controller, you get rid of that dependency on US East 1's control plane, and you now have a dedicated Route 53 control plane for you to leverage for your changes to your DNS. That said, it can be very expensive. So I would only leverage this in very critical applications that 100% cannot tolerate downtime. But I do like this zonal shift capability. I think this gives competent operators, the controls they need to be able to make changes without having to rely on AWS to confirm something's down, or waiting for the lag that might happen between different health checks. Okay, jumping into builder experience. I'm going to grab a quick coffee here. And I'm going to check the the LinkedIn chat here. So Jim Ash says maybe it lets you pick a specific target AZ for that S3 backup outside of whatever it might be automatically or go. Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand S3 backup. I'm interested in learning more about that if anyone wants to dive deeper. And again, if anyone has any questions, we can get into that. Okay, so jumping into AWS Application Composer. So if I'm 99% sure this is the result of Amazon's acquisition of a company called Stackery. I don't know that for sure. I don't have any insider knowledge, but if you look at what exists in this and what was available with Stackery, they look the same. So what it does is it helps you visually compose and configure AWS services. um, it will output CloudFormation. Uh, there's CloudFormation already has this capability of visually kind of arranging things. So I'm sure we've all seen that console. The original version of that, by the way, was written in like Google Web Toolkit. If anyone remembers that, GWT from way back in the day. Um, this is good, but I hate that it only outputs CloudFormation. I think it would be phenomenal if it also output CDK or if it also output Terraform. I'm finding myself getting further and further away from CloudFormation, pure CloudFormation. I find the capabilities of Terraform and I find the capabilities of CDK to be superior, even though, for instance, CDK compiles down to CloudFormation. The capability to implement custom logic and all these sorts of things within CDK is much more powerful. And if I want to add an IAM permission boundary, for example, I now have that capability. Lots of use cases for this, and I'm interested to play around with it more and see what people are doing. Also launched Amazon Code Catalyst. So, over the years, we've seen a bunch of different ways. We've seen things like CodeStar. We've seen, even Elastic Beanstalk launch something similar to this a long time ago. But the way that Code Catalyst works is it's this unified software development service that makes it faster to build and deliver software on AWS. And you basically pick from a set of primitives and you compose those, and it will provision a Cloud9 environment or a VS Code folder for you so that you can open it up in VS Code, and will sort of send you off to the races. And you can either host it in CodeCommit or you can host it in GitHub, and you can even remotely host the VS Code instance. And I think this is, this kind of competes with things like Replit. It competes with things like Code Sandbox. And the fact that it's an AWS native implementation means that you can bring in net new components quite easily. That said, I'm not exactly sure where this lives in the AWS, ecosystem and what sort of investment they're going to put into this. So I'm cautious about adopting it as my primary method for, building. But I can be convinced otherwise. And once it's out of preview, I'll probably get a lot more time playing with it. There's also AWS Code Whisperer. You can think of this as AWS's response to GitHub Copilot. Frankly, this was being worked on long before Copilot came out. If you're not familiar with Copilot, or if you're not familiar with Code Whisperer, this is an AI assistant that will help you as you're writing code. So it generates code recommendations as you're typing. So you can, see a demo of it in just a moment here. And I think it's powerful. I've been using it alongside Copilot. So I've been using both for a pretty long time now. And I find that Code Whisperer is particularly good with Java and JavaScript and TypeScript. I don't find it as useful for Python. So, and I also find the same thing about Copilot, by the way. I find Copilot very good for Java, JavaScript, and TypeScript. And I don't write C# normally, so I can't really speak to that. But I find that they are less useful with Python. And I don't know if that is due to the fact that Java, JavaScript, and TypeScript tend to have more boilerplate, and a lot more kind of try and accept sort of stuff. Whereas Python, you can write a little more succinctly. But overall, I found a lot of the suggestions in Python are less valuable than the suggestions in other languages. This is integrated with AWS Cloud9 and Visual Studio Code and JetBrains and all kinds of other things. And we'll see a quick example here. So, you know, we're going to type, and these are the things that it's suggesting. And, you can write in an English language description of what you want this to do and the doc string, and it will help autofill the doc string here. And I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit. And you kind of get each of these by pressing Control Space. So I think now you're going to write the method signature. And then I think if you press Control Space again, it will auto fill that in. There we go. Yep. So pretty powerful. Don't know why that was so weird. I hope that came through on the live stream. Sorry. Okay, security and compliance. There's a lot to cover here, so I'm going to jump right in. Threat detection and monitoring. Amazon launched Amazon Security Lake. So this is a new security service that automates the sourcing, aggregation, normalization, enrichment, and data management of security-related data across your organization. You can think of this as, you have Security Hub, but Security Hub is really for viewing the various services. This is more for, where do you send your SEIM or SIEM and other sort of data and collect it and review it and audit it. So you can think about VPC flow logs or S3 logs or CloudTrail, Security Hub notifications, even third-party things from Palo Alto or Cisco or Okta, Zscaler. These things can all be part of your ingest pipeline. Then the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, which is something that I will talk about later in the other section. But the fact that Amazon is working on this and contributing to this is great. All of that data will sort of come in. You can run transforms on it. You can run queries on it. And even third-party partners or ISVs can go and make similar sort of inferences on it. And you can plug in Amazon Detective and Amazon Athena and OpenSearch, all the other good stuff that you would expect. There are a number of different partners that are launching with Security Lake by default. And GuardDuty got an expansion, so you can now use GuardDuty for RDS. And GuardDuty is pretty powerful. I'm a fan. I'm bullish on it. I don't use it in my dev workloads, but we have a number of customers that leverage GuardDuty, and it tends to make pretty accurate and useful inferences about the security or threat intelligence. GuardDuty container runtime threat detection. So this can now run inside of your container. I believe it can also run as a sidecar, and it can monitor OS level behavior in the container, file access, process execution, and network connections. And it can look for data exfil and things like that. Moving right along. And Amazon Inspector now has support for AWS Lambda functions. So this can be deployed across multiple accounts, and you get a single pane of glass for visibility into your EC2 instances, your container images, and your Lambda functions. And so when you're shipping new code, Inspector can go and analyze what's being pulled in. It can look for, CVEs or things that have been pushed into the, we just recently saw that PyPy had a malicious package deployed. So this can kind of help mitigate that. And you can also leverage something like Amazon Code Artifact to mirror repos and, use a single source of truth for your packages and stuff like that. This can be automated through EventBridge, and you can write custom logic for that if needed. The pro of this is it doesn't run alongside your containers or instances or functions. It is just something that kind of runs when you're pushing new code and deploying new things. Macie introduces automated sensitive data discovery, so this can find PII. Cost efficient from AWS's perspective is slightly different from my definition of cost efficient. But if everyone remembers when Macie first came out, it could really throw up your AWS bill and your S3 bill very, very quickly. Luckily, that is no longer the case. There's a lot more sort of guardrails built in, and the overall cost of the service is down a little bit. So I think this is great for organizations that are probably mistakenly logging a lot of PII and they would like to not do that. So Macie will let you find that. We talked about Lattice already. Let's skip ahead. We talked about verified access. Let's skip ahead. So this is something that I'm interested in. And so there's two things. There's AWS IAM Anywhere, and then there's Amazon Verified Permissions. I'm very interested in figuring out how to take advantage of these. I don't know that it's entirely clear how you go about rolling these out and how you would adapt from, say, whatever RBAC system you're using now into this. But being able to move IAM that exists within the AWS layer into, whatever layer you're working in, your app layer, it can minimize the auth and RBAC overhead that you're already dealing with. I think that's the vision for it. I don't know if that's like what's going to genuinely happen. Or I guess they're saying, instead of RBAC, they're saying PBAC, or policy-based access control. So, you have your different applications and you have your verified permissions and you're being able to go in and take advantage of that. So XSS still happens these days. There's lots of different ways that, sorry, I'm talking about cross-site scripting. I meant XKS, which is external key store. So this is for folks who have existing keys or want to leverage keys outside of AWS. Frankly, if you need that much security, I'm curious what you're doing. Like Cloud HSM to me is honestly enough. I don't think I have any use case where I would need external key store, but if you need it, it's there now. And you can leverage this to use KMS to transparently kind of deal with various encryption schemes. Okay, clean rooms. So this is kind of interesting. I think this is particularly interesting for ad tech, and I'm going to take a quick look at the chat. We're probably going to go over time. Yeah, we're definitely going to go about 10 minutes over time. Sorry. So if anyone has any chat questions, please feel free to go ahead. So clean rooms allow you to kind of share data anonymously, and it allows what I can say is co-opetition. So one way I could think of this working is all the different airlines maintain their own no-fly lists, but it would be cool if they could all just share the no-fly list without having to share, where it came from or have this lineage of data and all this other stuff. Or, you have ad tech data, which is targeting data on a customer, and you want to make sure that, you're not bidding on ads that this person has already purchased or this person has already done something. So you could share data with your competitors in a way that's mutually beneficial to all of you. At least that's how I have been thinking about this. And I'm curious to learn more about this. Yeah, more on that. Wickr. So this was another acquisition that AWS made, and it's yet another communication IAM tool. I think this, AWS has Chime. Now they have Wickr. I think this is pretty heavily used in the what do you call it? Like the federal side of things. And I haven't used this. I don't need to use it, but interested to hear from people who have used it. I think it's kind of amusing that we have yet another instant messaging tool from AWS. All right. So, if you remember, like before Wickr, there was Chime. Before Chime, there was Biba. And Biba was the acquisition that became Chime. And then Wickr, interested to see what all this turns out to be. All right. This is probably one of the best launches ever. So AWS Config Proactive Compliance. So when you are deploying things into AWS, this can now check if it complies with these rules, these config rules that you set up, and if it does not, it can reject that deployment. So this is great. I've been wanting this to exist for a very long time, and the fact that we can now do that is wonderful. Control Tower got some, UI updates for kind of comprehensive controls management. And Control Tower deploys these through a combination of config rules and a combination of service control policies. If you're interested in, getting your Control Tower environment right, that's actually something that we specialize in at Kayland. So we have something called the AWS Control Tower Catalyst that, we've gotten pretty darn good at deploying Control Tower and manipulating it to suit your organization's needs. And we can even customize it for very secure environments as well. Verified permissions again, Security Lake again, proactive compliance. I'm sorry, I think I've duplicated some slides there, but we also got delegation of administrative accounts. So this was another pre-invent thing. The interesting thing is that the IAM billing and console team are launching new service principles, as well as so IAM now has, AWS billing now has fine-grained access control. And there used to be a service principle called AWS Portal, and you would have to give that to all of like your billing admins and all this other stuff. But now you can restrict that to, I only want you to be able to work in Cost Explorer, or, I only want you to be able to work within this console. The advantage of AWS organizations having the delegation of administrative accounts is that you no longer have to be in the root management account to make changes to SCPs and other kind of components. This is very useful, and it's I would say a security best practice. So look into it. Macy, we talked about Control Tower Account Factory customization. So within Account Factory, you have Account Factory for Terraform, and then you have the sort of service catalog version of Account Factory where you're launching new accounts from CloudFormation templates and doing a bunch of initial setup. There's just a bunch of new settings here, and I think this is what we build our Control Tower Catalyst on top of, and I think it's very, very powerful. I would love to see an offering that's built into Control Tower that is similar to AWS's internal account system called Isengard, where I can give every single one of my developers an account, or every single one of my developers a sandbox account, and I can blow it away and then spin up a new one whenever I want. I think that sort of flexibility would be really, really powerful. CloudTrail Lake. So if you missed this earlier in the year, CloudTrail now has organization level CloudTrails and CloudTrail Lake, which can bring in your AWS config reports as well as your CloudTrail logs, and you can query those. And this makes it a lot easier to audit or search for things that have happened. Inspector for Lambda functions we covered. External key store we covered. This is my fault for merging a couple of slides here. And we talked about GuardDuty for RDS. All right, and now we're into data and analytics. And I'm going to go at a blazing speed here because we don't have a ton of time left. Okie dokie. So there are a lot of purpose-built databases. Werner Vogels wrote a post a while back called One Size Fits All Doesn't Fit Anybody. If you did not see Swami's keynote at reInvent, dial it up on YouTube. It was fantastic. And I think Swami made a number of great points about, why we no longer have to shove everything into one database, and why, many of the top AWS customers are leveraging multiple AWS databases. Personally, I've used Neptune, I've used Keyspaces, I've used TimeStream, Dynamo, DocumentDB, all the versions of Aurora, and then basically every version of RDS, including RDS Custom. And each one has its use cases. So I would describe 2022 reInvent as with regard to data, as the year of Spark. Basically everything got Spark integration, which is great. I like Apache Spark. But another integration that I think is pretty powerful is this zero ETL integration, where you can take your Aurora your Aurora stuff and move it directly into Redshift, and vice versa. And so if you think about the traditional columnar store, sorry, the traditional row level store of Aurora and how it's optimized for row level access, you can move that into Redshift and get that columnar format and start to do whatever sort of ETL you need to do, and then move it back if you need to, or just shift one view back. This is in preview. I haven't had a chance to use it yet, but I intend on taking advantage of it immediately upon GA. Like I said, Apache Spark integration. So we got Spark for Glue, we got Spark for Athena, we got Spark for Redshift. I guess we already had Spark for Glue. Anyway, so we'll dive into some of these. This integration for Spark, great. SageMaker has it now. Skip ahead a little bit. Sorry, just due to time. Redshift now has multi-AZ deployments. You can auto copy from S3 to kind of ingest your data. Lots of people use Redshift in a scaled fashion, so this is a great way to like auto turn on and start your Redshift instances. Glue got updates for PySpark and Spark so that it can access things and deal with things a little bit faster. It got AWS Glue data quality, which we'll talk about, Glue for Ray, which we'll talk about, and then Glue custom visual transform. So Ray is a pretty great Python library, and I've used it many times for ETL or just for general sort of data science purposes. And you can now use Ray within Glue, and you can take your existing kind of Ray code that you have and just give it to Glue and say, hey, go run this for me. I've played around with this. I think the marketing of like you can seamlessly just take your existing Ray scripts and dump them into Glue and have it work. That might be a little bit ambitious. You do have to kind of know a little bit about the underlying stuff that's happening, but overall, I would say it's pretty good. Now we have DataZone. So this is a data management service that is helpful for organizations that are trying to bring in insights across many different data sources. This is in preview, and the idea is essentially that you have all these different data producers, and maybe they're coming from different accounts or different sub-organizations within your organization, and you need a portal with some governance and some controls that's going to be responsible for making sure you aren't mistakenly giving social security numbers out to like one random phone agent. Like you want to make sure that you have the right governance in place for your data. And that's something we talk about a lot at Kalen is, what does it mean to be governance is kind of the foundation of everything else that you want to do with your data. So AWS Glue data quality. So this has automatic data quality rule recommendations. It can kind of effectively, continuously monitor your data. So I assume this does anomaly detection, and you can set the automatic rules, and I think you can also define some custom rules. QuickSight got a bunch of updates. QuickSight, I would say a couple years ago was unusable, and it has somehow jumped the chasm from unusable to like must have. I think it's one of the best things out there. I think it's a great service. I wish it were less expensive, but check it out. The Q side of things is pretty powerful. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all of this. Athena support for Apache Spark. DocumentDB Elastic clusters. This is interesting. I was kind of hoping they might launch something like DocumentDB built on Aurora so that you wouldn't have to think about scaling the individual nodes, sort of the way that Aurora Serverless works. RDS optimized writes. This is enabled from the ENA Express, the SRD connection to EBS. Blue-green deployments we talked about. Amazon OpenSearch serverless. So if you think about Elasticsearch, you have to do a lot of instance provisioning and stuff. This takes that away. Kinesis Firehose direct into OpenSearch. So you can now just stream records into that. DocumentDB Elastic Cluster we covered already. Sorry, it's a duplicate slide. And DMS schema conversion. So schema conversion has existed already. This is just an enhancement to some of the existing capabilities. And, this is great marketing. In the real world, very often, it is not as simple as just doing like a schema conversion tool output, um, and hoping for the best. Like you often have to dive in a little bit deeper, especially with heterogeneous database migrations. MemoryDB and Redis 7. Clean rooms we talked about. Lake formation. Okay, this is another really great one. So you could always compile Postgres with different language support, and then you could write triggers that would fire off in those languages, but you weren't able to do that with an RDS. So now with trusted language extensions, you can run those triggers. You can write in like JavaScript and Perl and I don't know, like regular SQL, and those languages can fire off and do stuff as part of your SQL workflow. I'm excited about that one. All right. Lambda, really, really big. I think the biggest launch for serverless from 2022 reInvent is going to be Lambda Snapstart. So this is basically taking a snapshot of the memory of the instance and that's running, or the container that's running, the JVM that's running, and it's saying, okay, now that this initialization is done, now that the memory is initialized, well, this invoke handler is going to be the only thing that runs. I don't have to worry about any of the other underlying components. Event Bridge pipes, I'm pretty excited. This one, I have played around with it. So far, the filtering and the enrichment is very powerful. The best part about this is like you don't have to write it as a VTL anymore. You have some other kind of rules and techniques that you can use. Let's see. Distributed map for step functions. This is a big deal as well. AppFlow. So I've been sleeping on AppFlow and I haven't really had a chance to play with it. I have just recently started using it to kind of bring in our Google Analytics data from our website and start to send that to different things to see if I can't make some inferences from that. The fact that they've added all of these different integrations and then they added 10 more just recently this month, I think I'm bullish on AppFlow and I'm going to start investing a little more time into it. And then we get into machine learning, and just in the interest of time, we're going to go crazy fast now. So we have our layers, right, of infrastructure, SageMaker, AI services. We have the Nitro system, we have Graviton, and we have Inferentia and Trainium. The crazy thing that we saw in terms of silicon from reInvent 2022 is that these Trainium chips are capable of 1.2 terabits per second of throughput. Or maybe it was 1.6 terabits per second of throughput. This is definitely only going to be available through the Elastic Fabric adapter. I don't think you would ever get that from a traditional network interface. And the Trainium instances are optimized for doing these DL training jobs. We covered Inf2 already. And there's also these new instance types supported with the NVIDIA A100 GPUs, 640 gigabytes of GPU memory. Then we get into ML governance. So SageMaker has some ML governance tools that they've added, model cards that can have some metadata about your models, some role management so that you can say who can do what within the models or who can do what within the deployment. Custom user permissions, and hopefully this relies on IAM underneath. And then you have your model dashboards. This is just some UI updates. Moving right along. I apologize. There's a lot to cut from this talk. We talked about DataZone already. Okay, Omics. So this is a new launch. I wasn't exactly sure where to put this. Is it an other? Is it a notebook thing? Is it a SageMaker thing? But essentially, this is a genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics based service that integrates with HealthAche and SageMaker. I'm not an expert in this field, but apparently it's pretty cool. I've heard some talk on Twitter about it and people liked it. Now we have SageMaker Data Wrangler, just some new features. Automatically generates visualizations and can understand, distribution or quality issues, and makes it a little bit easier to get some insights from your initial data. And again, SageMaker got a ton of data sources, and like a ton of data sources, and they've added more since we saw this. Alrighty, moving right along here. We talked about Glue for Ray. We talked about Spark. SageMaker Feature Store got some additional features in that it's able to use the Apache Iceberg format. I think Athena can now query the Apache Iceberg format as well. And the SageMaker Python SDK was updated to support offline storage of some of these features. Then we get into SageMaker Studio usability. I believe the coolest launch here is that you can now do concurrent editing. So you can have multiple people on one notebook. And I've got a demo for that, but I'm just going to skip forward. Sorry. And you can launch jobs from notebooks. Fair warning with SageMaker Studio, you got to set some pretty intense lifecycle policies in there because it's not always obvious that they're still running. So just keep that in mind. Glue interactive sessions that can work directly with SageMaker. Multiple domains for SageMaker. Better tagging and cost allocation. Geospatial ML. This is like a whole thing that you could dive deep into if you wanted to focus solely on AI. Again, have to click forward. Sorry, just in the interest of time. You've got shadow testing. So you always had sort of A/B deployments for SageMaker inference endpoints, but now you can replicate a request to both the production variant and the shadow variant, and you can compare the results afterwards and see how that model was performing. You have more models, more GPUs, all the other good stuff. Multi-models, GPUs, batch transforms got better. Jumpstart ML Hub, just a lot of stuff. SageMaker Canvas improvements. And SageMaker Pipelines improvements, SageMaker Autopilot improvements. We got Code Whisperer, which we covered already. We've got the ability to understand exactly what's happening within some of these AI services. Textract got support for mortgage or lending documents. Textract also got, expense API. Let's see. Transcribe has real-time call analytics, so you could implement this alongside a call center other than Amazon Connect if you wanted. I think this is built into Amazon Connect Wisdom. Comprehend for documents, so this can now automatically read PDFs in Microsoft Word and images and can do OCR on those and extract out that stuff and do some of the things that you're used to. Kyndra remains incredibly expensive, but gets more and more useful. You can use multiple languages, and you can search through HTML pages and other kinds of documents. And then just to close this out here, the IoT Core got updated to MQTT5. SimSpace Weaver is, a Unity and Unreal Engine 5 sort of simulation integration. I don't know anything about this. I don't know exactly what it's used for. I was thinking maybe it's used for reinforcement learning, or maybe it's used for reasoning within like factories and stuff. AWS Supply Chain is a new service that launched. It takes data in from many different locations. I wasn't exactly sure where to put this. Marketplace got a number of updates. Marketplace for Containers supports direct deployments to EKS clusters. That's a pretty interesting one. Integrating third-party data into your data mesh is possible. And then Amazon Bracket, if you're into the quantum computing side, so you can open up some Jupyter notebooks and run some example quantum workloads there. Amazon Connect got, and a lot of this was kind of pre-invent and some of it's in preview, but the wisdom side of Connect got a number of different updates and forecasting, capacity planning, scheduling. The agent workspace got some updates and improvements, and Contact Lens got some chat integration, so you don't have to. Contact Lens, I think previously was only analyzing the calls, but now it can also monitor some additional channels. What isn't in here is the fact that they finally added JSON support for Amazon Connect Chat, which, like, frankly, should have launched with that service originally and the fact that it never launched was preventing a lot of the downstream integration with other services. But now with JSON support and Amazon Connect Chat, you can make it talk to Twitter, you can make it talk to uh, Messenger, or Instagram, or WhatsApp. It just becomes much easier to write these in-customer integrations for Connect Chat. Game Lift Anywhere lets you run your game servers anywhere. I think it's particularly cool for customers like Riot. And I am exhausted. That is a long, long talk. To close this out, I will say that, again, this is my first time giving this talk. Clearly, I need to do some editing on some of the slides. I've got to get some of the timing nailed a little bit better. But I wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining. I wanted to say thank you to all the people at AWS that worked really hard on these slides, all the people at AWS that worked really hard on launching these products. I know that it is not easy to get that out there and then have it shredded to pieces by people like me, and the millions of emails you're getting of like, oh, hey, can you allow list me for this service? Can you allow list me for this service? I really appreciate all the work that AWS does to make our lives better as developers. I look forward to seeing that continue. Kalent, we are a cloud native consulting company, and we are out there to build the best products in AWS. So we're all in on AWS. We don't work with other cloud providers. And our job is to focus as much on AWS as we can so that you can focus on your products, focus on what you're building, and let us take care of the cloud part, because that's what we love to do. We're all passionate technologists. If you enjoyed the talk today, please take a moment, hold up your phone to the screen. This QR code should allow you to launch a survey. We'll be giving away $50 AWS credit codes to all the respondents that fill out the survey. This is only going to be live for a period of time. So if you're watching the video on demand version of this, you might have to, you probably won't be able to get the $50 credit code anymore. Again, a huge thank you to everyone that took the time to attend today and everyone who took the time to listen. And that's it. I'm going to say that we are done. If anyone has any questions, I'll be on Twitter. I'll head on LinkedIn. But that is the end of our presentation today. And I'm going to close this all out. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.